right, welcome everyone to Intro to Coding Week 1, presented by Cassandra Brown, a PhD candidate in computer science at Tennessee State University. This course is just to give a brief introduction to what computer programming is and introduce you guys to the programming language of Python. Just a few things about me. I am a current double alumni from Tennessee State University. I have my Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science. I have my Master's of Science in Computer Science as well. And then I'm a PhD candidate of Computer Science at Tennessee State University, studying computational sciences and machine learning, sort of in that data science realm of things. I'm also a POTUS Fellow at the university. I am a Highbridge Fellow as well, which is an outside fellowship that I received this year. I'm an instructor and a faculty member of the Computer Science Department at Tennessee State University, a mentor, as well as a nonprofit founder as well. My nonprofit is Tech Beauties, which introduces coding and robotics to underrepresented groups, which is Black and Latinx young girls that are in middle school and high school, just introducing and exposing them to technology and computer programming and coding and computer science and robotics as well. So let's get started. Let's dive right on in. So, what are your expectations? I know some of the students in the class that came in person the first week, they mentioned some of their expectations. So if you come in person, just let me know what your expectations are. You can also email them to me at labadmin@cathedralpraise.org, or find me on LinkedIn, message that as well. But just kind of have an idea of what your expectations are. What do you want to gain from this course? So, what do we learn, or what will we learn in this course or during this coding boot camp for 6 weeks? You'll learn some problem solving techniques. You'll learn to translate real world issues into logical steps a program or a computer, in this case, can understand. You'll talk about or learn about, you will learn about debugging, how to debug and solve errors in programs, and how to code is the overall goal of this programming course, which is introducing you to computer programming and how to build simple projects so that you can have the hands-on experience to also delve into building more complex real-world projects of your own. So, introduction to Python programming, the world of programming and its applications. So Python is a versatile language. It is simplistic and easy to read and understand for beginners. So it's a really good scripting language, very easy to understand, very easy to comprehend in most cases, and easy to implement. Let's get into, let's go back. The basic syntax and variables of Python. So, understanding Python code structure, the statements in a Python program direct the operation of the program. So, each statement, you could think of it as sentences in this case. Each sentence, if you give someone instruction, then that instruction gives them some type of direction, some type of guidance. To end statements like sentences, you mostly require a ending punctuation, such as a period in this case, as you can see. But in Python, we do not use any endings for the statements. Most programming languages, like Java, for instance, uses semicolons, but in Python, you just literally put your statements, no ending punctuation. So it makes it a lot easier, a lot simple to implement, and it also helps with errors. To make a program easier to read, you should use indentations and spacing, aligning statements and blocks of code. Today we'll talk about variables, and I'll introduce you guys to using variables in Python. Variables and keywords in Python. An identifier is any name that you create in a Python program. That could be classes, methods, variables. A keyword is a word that's reserved by the Python language. Note that they cannot be the same name as your identifiers. And we'll see a table that lists our identifiers. Python is a case-sensitive language, meaning we must use the correct uppercase and lowercase spelling in naming our identifiers, which are classes, methods, variables, function names, which are method names as well. So here is a chart of different keywords. These are just the basic keywords that we will use in this workshop. I will introduce you all to if statements, else's, for loops, while loops, definitions, or def in this case, which defines a function, the and, which is membership testing, so it checks if an element is in a sequence, so that's working with strings as well. We'll get into logical operators, which is and or not, and we will also look into the print statement and as well as the input statement or function as well. In this week, for instance, we just worked with the print statement, and then in next week's class, we will work with using input for taking user input from the keyboard. So let's define what a variable is. A variable is used to store a value that changes as a program executes. So it can change as the program executes. Here's an analogy. Variables are like storage boxes. Whenever you want to work with the information, you access it using the variable. New information must be stored in a variable. Modifying information of a variable means accessing it and then storing it, which means changing its value again. So you're changing its value to a new value. And then it's just being reassigned to that variable. The analogy in this case is just as we store things in boxes in the real world, so you can store things in variables when working with applications. One thing to keep in mind with working with variables that once you declare or create a variable, the name must remain the same throughout your entire project or program in this case. If you have it a certain way with the spelling, that must also be used throughout your program as well. Just so when you're creating these programs, you can just think about if you have to define a variable, you can think about I'm creating a storage box and I'm giving it some value, so you're adding value to it. And we'll look at an example when we get to our demo. So we're working with input and output. So most applications require some interaction. So if you think about Facebook, when we log into our Facebook accounts, that login user interface asks for us to input some type of data. And if we get our password or our login information or credentials incorrectly, we will see an output screen or an output message that's telling us that the password was incorrect. So that's using input and output with most applications and applications in the real world. So these functions or methods in this case refer to how programs get information from the user. There's a built-in function named input. It is used to capture typed information from the keyboard, and it always returns a string. In this case, what we'll be working with in our beginning, very basic, very beginning program is just working with strings. It always returns a string unless the user input is converted to the desired data type, and we'll get into data types in later weeks. Python displays information to the user using the print statements. So this is something that we worked on this past week. So using this function, we can print multiple things. We can also print just one statement or one string followed by the value of a variable or a value that is stored in a variable to the console. And then strings can also be formatted using the .format method. So we'll play around with that as well, especially when working with different types of strings and outputs. So let's get started and code. I will show you guys the demonstration that we did in our most recent class last week, where we created a variable. We got exposed to the Python IDE integrated development environment, and we will code our phone numbers and just create different variable. Just create one variable in this case, and then next week we will get into using the input function, the format method, as well as creating more variables and getting us familiar with creating our first program. All right, so let's code. So here's the Python IDE. You will see this on the computers that's installed in the lab, or you'll see it on your desktop. If not, then you can just navigate to the folder where this program or application is found. I could do installation for different OSs maybe later in the weeks, and show you guys how to install on your own computers. Very simple thing to do. So let's get started. So double click the IDLE in this case. I may have said IDE, but I'm just used to saying that from other languages, but they all do the same thing. So when you double click the application, you will open up the IDLE shell, which is the Python shell. You can actually type help to see some information about Python. And then you can kind of like search through it to quit, just enter Q, and you go back to your normal screen. In this case, I just wanted to show you guys. I'm just going to exit off because I wanted to start from scratch. I will show you guys how we created a variable, defined a variable, and how we assigned it a value. So we created a storage box. Its label was phone number, and we assigned its value to be our phone number. So you can do this on your own machines. If you're coming into the class next week, you can start off with this program from these videos, and then you can actually be caught up with the class. So that's the purpose of these videos. And it's also to help those of you who can't make it to the class just learn about Python and just a new programming language as well. And if you're on my YouTube channel, welcome. I'm just going to be showing just basic introduction to Python and how to use it and how to create programs using it. Very basic, simple programs for those who are interested, who are non-tech people, who are curious about learning new things. Yeah, so let's get started. So before I start on the coding piece, let's just talk about variable names. So just like when we type our own sentences or words, variables must be, in this case, we have phone number. So phone number is a perfect variable name. It can actually be, and I'm not going to hit enter because we will see a syntax error. You have phone number. You have it these different ways. You have phone number. You can put just phone num, any type of naming conventions you like, but in this case, we're used to hitting space, so you can't include spaces in Python, or you'll see this invalid syntax error because of the spacing issue. So you can't have spaces in between, for instance, variable names who have two names. So if you have phone, you can put an underscore and have number. And if you hit enter, you'll see another syntax error here. It tells us on line 1 that phone number is not defined. Defined means that we didn't give it some value, so we did not put a value into our storage box. So what I had the class do was we just create a variable named phone number. To define it, we will use the equal sign for assignment, just like my name is Cassandra, and I am a computer science student. So the value that I assigned to myself was that I was a computer science student. So the phone number that I will be using is going to be 901-523-5555. So no formatting in this case, just straight up put the number, just add the value to it, hit enter, and then we want to just output to the console this value. So you can just type the name of your variable. So remember, if you want to access the value of a variable, you will want to go to that variable or go to that storage complex in this case, get access to your storage container or your storage box, then open up the box, and then you have access to your valuables. But in this case, our storage box is phone number. The value that's assigned to it is going to be the phone number. So if I just hit enter here, I have the phone number printed. So we looked at the print function as well. We used the print function, and we use the print function a lot in Python. So it's very simple. We want to print our value that's stored in phone number using the print function. So instead of just typing the variable name, you want to write print or type print, open parentheses. You can put different types of arguments inside of this function. I normally close my parentheses just to make sure that I'm typing this right and I avoid syntax errors. But if you want to just type your variable name, phone number, and close it, hit enter, same thing appears in the shell. So two different ways of doing things. It's very convenient to use a print statement. If you wanted to add some string to it, so add some text to it, you would use double quotes, put that text, my phone number is, comma separated. So you put a comma to separate the string. So this has just been outputted to the console. It's not a variable or anything. We're just printing my phone number is, and then you want to print your actual phone number beside it. So you want the IDE or the computer to go and access the value of this variable in the memory, and then when you hit enter, you will print my phone number is. Very simple. This is what we did in week 1. We just created a variable, name phone number. We assigned it to our actual phone number using the equal sign. We just typed phone number, which is our variable name, to have the IDE print our value of our variable, and then we also implemented the print function that also does the same behavior. And then we added some text to our print function to make it more easier to read. Instead of just printing out the number, we want to identify that this is my number. My phone number is 901-523-55555. So these are strings. So remember that the print statement only prints out strings unless the user or unless the programmer in this case specifies that this is an integer, this is a formatted string, this is a decimal value. But we'll get into data types in the later weeks. So the last thing that we did in class was we wanted to save our Python files so that we can go back and access them in the previous weeks and just continue to work cohesively on our programs and just make sure that everything is organized. So you have the opportunity to go to File, choose New File, and then you have this Open Script. So if you kind of like slide it to the side, you also can use this because when you run your codes, the output will still be from the shell, and we'll talk about that. And normally when you run it in this empty document or this empty Python file, because that's what this is, when you run it in this empty Python file, the shell pops up in front of it, so it kind of overlaps it a little bit. So this is a blank Python file. So here we can put multiple statements, so multiple sentences for Python for the computer to understand, but it's the Python programming language. So what we did for the first thing is to identify our phone number variable, assign it to be our phone number, and then we just wanted to print my phone number is, and then put your phone number variable name here. So with Python files and building files, you get to put multiple statements, even if you want to print hello world here. Print coding is fun. Print I love Jesus. Notice that we're not putting any semicolons, any periods, any exclamation points, because once we run this, we will see syntax errors, and they'll literally be pointing at these different boxes. The semicolon one will work because most programming languages have and include that ending, but in Python it's not necessarily, so it's kind of by preference, but by standard we do not include a semicolon. So this is our very first Python program. So what we're expecting to see on the console is not this. It will not be phone number is equal to 901-523-5555555. It'll be everything that's within these print statements, because the print statement prints the value of variables and it also prints text. So this is text or strings in this case. This is text and the value of a variable. So let's run our Python code. So if you go up top, and this is the same thing for Windows machines, you want to go to run and click run module, and you'll get this pop-up that says source must be saved, and just say okay to save. And you'll get access to your what is it called? Your directory to where you want to save it. So choose desktop. These steps work on Windows as well, or wherever you saved your file, wherever you created your Python class 2024 file. You want to go to save as and change the name to week 1. I'm going to put demo because I have it saved from last week. And then you want to make sure that this format, and then in Windows this doesn't say format, it says save as types. So if you click the drop down, it'll show that you can save it as txt, you can save it as all files, but in this case we want to make sure that it says Python files, so we can have that .py for Python at the end of our file. Choose save, and then notice that our shell popped back up and we have our output. My number is not 555. My number is 901-523-55555. We got hello world, we got coding is fun, and we also have I love Jesus printed. And if I do our weekly demo, if I put the demo side by side, you can see the differences between the two. Let me go and access this. Well, let me do it this way. Sorry about that, guys. Give me 2 seconds. Boom. So our code says create a storage box, name phone number, assign it to be this phone number, print my phone number is, followed by, you're telling the computer to go access that storage box and retrieve that value. And then that's what we got here on this line here. Then we wanted to print after that hello world, which we got here in our output on our console. Then we wanted to print coding is fun. We have that here on our console as well. And then finally print I love Jesus, which is going to be printed to the console as well. So congratulations, you just created your very first Python program. So your Python program. So that's literally it. That's all we have. We just have our shell that runs, our outputs, or our console that's going to show us what our code does, and then we have our actual Python file that holds all of our statements. So all of the instruction that we're giving to the computer to compile and output to the console. So thank you guys for listening. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. We will get into inputs. We'll create some more variables first. Then we'll get into using the keyboard to input this value instead of having to hard code it or manually input it or assign it to these assign it to these variables. Thank you.